According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, there are two sacraments of healing, penance and the anointing of the sick, which is also called extreme unction. The Catechism explains the purpose of this sacrament in these words: By the sacred anointing of the sick and the prayer of the priests, the whole Church commends those who are ill to the suffering and glorified Lord, that he may raise them up and save them. And indeed she exhorts them to contribute to the good of the people of God by freely uniting themselves to the passion and death of Christ. There is a scriptural basis for this sacrament. The Gospel of Mark tells us that Jesus' apostles anointed the sick, even during Jesus' ministry before his death. And they cast out many demons, and anointed with oil many that were sick, and healed them. The Council of Trent taught that this passage from Mark's Gospel alludes to the anointing of the sick in a general way. St. James the Apostle explicitly tells the presbyters, that is, the priests, to anoint the sick for their spiritual and bodily healing. Is any among you sick? Let him call for the presbyters of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the sick man, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Over the centuries, the anointing of the sick was conferred increasingly only on those at the point of death. From this came the name extreme unction, last anointing, given to this sacrament. In recent years, the Church's practice has been to make greater use of this sacrament. Anointing is not only for those at the point of death, but also for those who are gravely ill, such as those undergoing a serious operation, and those who, due to chronic illness or advanced age, are in danger of death. Anointing may be conferred on a single sick person or on a group of sick persons, provided that the illness is serious and life-threatening. In years past, there was a tendency to put off calling the priest for anointing until the person was practically at the moment of death, so that some were even reluctant to send for the priest, for fear of alarming the sick person. However, there has now been an overreaction in the opposite direction, of administering the sacrament too readily, as if it were primarily a kind of therapeutic pastoral care. For example, in some places, there have been healing masses at which large numbers of people indiscriminately have been anointed simply because they are in poor health or feeling unwell. That is not a proper use of the sacrament of anointing, which is intended for those who are so seriously ill or so debilitated by age or facing such serious surgery that they are at the time of anointing in danger of death. Proper pastoral care of the sick is certainly very important, and those who do these anointings surely have good intentions and are responding to a real need. However, it is the Mass and Holy Communion and confession which are the sacramental means that should be provided for the sick who are suffering from less serious illness. To offer Mass for the sick, to pray for and with them, is certainly appropriate and necessary. Indiscriminate anointing of those who are not in danger of death is not. For those experiencing serious but not life-threatening illness and infirmity, there should be personal visits to the sick by both priests and fellow believers, with prayer and with the use of sacramentals such as holy water and the rosary and the brown scapular and blessed medals and blessed salt. We should also make greater use of the relics of the saints in visiting the sick, for God has often given great graces through the veneration of the relics of his holy ones. These sacraments and sacramentals and prayer are the means of grace for the sick under conditions in which there is no danger of death. To administer the anointing of the sick for lesser illnesses is a trivialization of the sacrament, and an impoverishment of our pastoral care and our sacramental life. Anointing is also not meant to be repeated for the same bout of illness. Once it is done, it need not be done again. However, if someone who has received anointing then recovers his health for a time, and then afterwards becomes sick again, in other words, relapses, the sacrament may indeed be repeated. If a person incapable of confessing his mortal sins is anointed, his mortal sins are in that anointing forgiven by God. However, on recovery, he should make a confession of sins when possible. In that respect, anointing is similar to general absolution, which is sometimes given when individual confession is not possible. In the anointing of the sick, the matter is anointing with blessed oil. The form is the priest's prayer for pardon and healing. The minister is a priest. The effects are fourfold. First, the grace to bear sickness. Second, forgiveness of sins, if not already received in penance. Third, restoration of health, if this is conducive to the person's salvation. And fourth, preparation for death. The essential rite is the anointing of the sick person's forehead and palms by a priest or bishop, who says the prayer for pardon and healing. The oil should be olive oil if possible, or at least oil from plants. This oil of the sick is blessed by the bishop at the Chrism Mass on Holy Thursday. In case of necessity, any priest can bless oil for the anointing of the sick. This sacrament may be given in many different settings, such as a private home, a hospital, or in church. The anointing of the sick may be preceded by confession and followed by Holy Communion. The anointing received as preparation for death is called the sacramentum ex euntium, the sacrament of those departing. The last communion received before death is called viaticum, since it is the sacrament that marks the final journey beyond this life. The Catechism of the Catholic Church expressed the place of the anointing of the sick in the Christian life in these words: The anointing of the sick completes our conformity to the death and resurrection of Christ, just as baptism began it. It completes the holy anointing that marked the whole Christian life, that of baptism which sealed the new life in us, and that of confirmation which strengthened us for the combat of this life. This last anointing fortifies the end of our earthly life like a solid rampart for the final struggles before entering the Father's house. Thus, just as the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and the Eucharist form a unity called the sacraments of Christian initiation, so too it can be said that penance, the anointing of the sick, and the Eucharist as viaticum constitute at the end of Christian life the sacraments that prepare for our heavenly homeland, or the sacraments that complete the earthly pilgrimage.